Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Rich. I am the CEO and Executive Director at the National Celiac Association. I'm so happy today to have joining me on this call is Karen Hertz, who is the Chief Brewista and founder of the Holidaily Brewing Company. So, Karen, welcome. Your title is like one of the best titles I've ever heard. Chief Brewista.
It's
That's so
totally
wonderful.
made up, but thank you.
That was good. So talk to me a little bit. I'd love for the audience to know about the process of how this came to be. Why did you decide to, start this brewing company and go the route that you did with it?
Yeah, I grew up here in Colorado, so Holidaily is in Golden, Colorado. But I grew up here, and beer and craft beer is a huge part of the Colorado social scene. And I actually got to work at Coors. So first of all, I went to school and got an MBA in entrepreneurship. I didn't really think I would start a company, but that was what I liked studying. And then I was working at Coors in the beer industry here in Colorado. So really loved the beer industry, working in that avenue. And then I had my own health struggles. So I am a two-time cancer survivor. First was diagnosed with melanoma, and second Hashimoto's thyroiditis and um, thyroid cancer. So had surgery and radiation for both of those situations, but was also diagnosed with a gluten intolerance. And beer was such a part of my life. I was working in beer, and it was part of the social scene around here. And there were no great gluten-free beers out there. So almost selfishly, I started home brewing. When I was at Coors, I was in distribution. So I was getting
Mhm.
beer, from the brewery here to states in the central United States. So I wasn't a brewer, but started home brewing and learning more about ingredients and what we could make great beer with that was gluten free. And once I made a trial batch that really I felt like was good, was the moment ultimately that I thought I needed to open a company. It was time, and it was something that I thought, there's enough people out there that just want to have a good beer,
Mhm.
that I think this is something that I should do. And um, ultimately, I had brewed this first brew, or this good brew, because there were a couple of very bad ones in the beginning.
Trial and
Um,
error.
yeah, yeah. Actually, was CSU, Colorado State, up in Fort Collins. And so you go up, and I brewed it, and that takes about a day. And then I came home, and it's about 3 weeks for it to ferment, carbonate. And they were like, okay, it's ready. Want to come on up? And my drive up to Fort Collins was like, oh man, I just hope I get to try a good beer today, gluten-free beer. And my drive home was, I'm starting a business. And it was that day, that moment. Um, so yeah, that was 10 years ago, essentially. We're in Colorado, and now we distribute to 11 states in the Western US.
Wow. I mean, that's just from 10 years ago, from an idea to now that type of
Yeah,
distribution,
yeah,
success story on its own. But also, you're 100% gluten free, but you're
yeah,
also the only certified women's owned brewery in the United States.
it's
And
true. Yeah.
I was going to say
I
it's
mean,
very commendable. I mean,
thank you.
being out in Colorado, I visited your tap room, and it's such a wonderful experience to be in there. The atmosphere, the number of selections that are there that you can get. It was just a nice experience. That part of that a highlight of a trip for me. But while being out there, there are many breweries, like you said. It's part of the culture out there.
Yeah.
So I mean, why haven't we seen, more people go towards, gluten-free brewing or, in your area? Why haven't we, as being I guess being the person who is, you're kind of the gold standard. You're carrying that torch for women's owned businesses. Are there others out there that you know of that are starting up, or, are you like that person who is that gold standard?
Well, I hope we're the gold standard, but so in terms of just some statistics, so there's 10,000 craft breweries in the US. 13 are dedicated gluten free. Of that 13, 2 are certified gluten-free. And when I say dedicated gluten-free, it means that's all they make is gluten-free beer. There are some breweries that make gluten-free beer on the side, or um, maybe it's like a brewery that brews for a whole lot of different breweries and they make gluten-free beer for a brand. To me, there's risk there in cross contamination. You know, when we brew with grain and there's dust everywhere. And so a dedicated brewery is real similar to a dedicated bakery. You want to be sure it's safe for those with celiac or high intolerances. So when I say there's 13 dedicated breweries in the US, that means that's all that they do. And they spread pretty wide. A majority are in the Pac Northwest, like Oregon and Washington. And we are the only one in Colorado. And then
Mhm.
of those 13, only 2 are certified gluten-free. And so really what that means, and it's us and a brewery in Oregon called Groundbreaker. And we just go through an added step to ensure that what we're doing is entirely safe for celiacs. And it allows us to put a gluten-free certification logo on our products. And then finally, you had alluded to our woman-owned certification. And that is out of all 10,000 breweries in the US, we are the only certified woman-owned brewery. Um, about 3% of breweries are majority women-owned.
Mhm.
15 have a woman involved, so it might be brother, sister, daughter, son, whatever, father, daughter, husband, wife. So about 15 involve a woman in the business. But what a certification means is that I prove that the majority of our ownership is female. And again, it's a logo that we can put on our products. And was important to me because I wanted people out in the market to know we're certified gluten free. We're real serious about this. And we are a woman owned company. And both of those are really important to me. In terms of starting gluten free breweries or breweries in general, um, it is a very cash forward business. So, as a small business owner, it can be a barrier to entry to people. Like I said, you can't really share equipment to make it entirely safe. So all of our equipment has been brand new. I mean, we have to, that's an expensive feat. And I think that's a barrier to entry for people in the space. I think too, gluten free is really growing a lot right now. And 10 years
Mhm.
ago, it was 1% of the population is diagnosed with celiac, and those numbers aren't enough to impress major investors or major retailers, right? Well, now it's 30% of the population is gluten free. So now we've got people's attention.
Mhm.
Retailers are very interested. Consumers are very interested. And it's not all celiac. Now it's gluten sensitivity is growing so much. And even just any diet you've heard of. So, vegan, paleo, gluten free, you name it, there's a gluten free aspect to it. And so anyone really watching what they're consuming is considering or eliminating considering gluten from their diet. So now we've got people's attention, and so I think for a while it was really a proof of concept. Like, are there enough people to justify 10,000 craft gluten-free breweries out there? Probably not. But if you're watching, you're like, oh man, this gluten-free category is growing. And I would expect some more could open in the future.
Yeah. And you touched on it, and I wanted to go back to it, the difference between a dedicated brewery and a certified brewery. And you had said, for the safety of the consumer, was that the main reason that you went that certification route? Because you wanted that little extra, verification to your customers that, yeah, we are doing all the right things here?
Honestly, there's really two reasons. And one is internal. Like, I wanted to be able to sleep at night and be like, let's be damn sure that we're not putting a product out there that's going to get people sick. So
Right.
they come in and audit me. They audit all of our production facilities, help with our processes, test, we have to test all of our products, all of our ingredients we have to test, um, train all of our staff. So it's like an added security for me to know I can say very confidently, anybody can drink this beer. And then on the other side was I knew from the beginning that I wanted to distribute beer. Remember, we talked about my days at Coors.
Mhm.
That's where my work experience was in distribution. And I just felt like, oh man, the whole reason I'm starting this thing is to get beer out to people so they can have a beer at a tailgate party with their friends or family. Um, so that was the other piece was, a lot of these gluten-free breweries are tap rooms, but they don't
Mhm.
distribute a lot. So you don't necessarily have to have that certification on your product. But for me, I knew we were going to be a distribution brewery. So I wanted to make it very clear to consumers that aren't in Colorado. Maybe they're in Texas, maybe they're in California, or as far as we end up distributing, I want them to know it's a safe product.
Okay. Now, are there different challenges with distribution of gluten-free beer versus if you're just a wheat or barley containing beer? Are there different things you have to think about there?
Um, a little bit. So we still fall under the beer category.
Mhm.
And so we have to go through what any brewery would have to go through. We have to get licensed in any new state. And there's a whole process to that, and every state is different. And then we do go through beer distributors. So there's wine distributors out there, liquor distributors out there, and then beer distributors. And as a gluten-free brewery, we go through the beer distributors. So it's a really a similar process to any other beer. I would say even right now there may be an advantage to it in that craft beer, traditional beer really has been it's saturated, right? And they're struggling a
Mhm.
little bit because there's, to your point, in Colorado, there's over 300 craft breweries here. And so how do you differentiate where we go in with gluten free and it's a unique proposition. It's not going to cannibalize, some of their other products, and it's growing. And so I think,
Mhm.
right in this minute, right now, it's almost an advantage for us. But the process is really pretty similar. A lot of it is the challenge is education. Why does it matter? What's going on with gluten free? Um, there's some other confusion around gluten free, gluten reduced, or gluten removed beers. So I really have to educate these people that have been selling, traditional beer for a while onto why it matters, how much we really are growing. And, there's a consumer out there that you're not reaching with the products that you carry.
Mhm. Mhm. So let's touch on this because this is a big thing for our gluten-free and celiac
Yeah.
community. The scene of a gluten-free beer versus something that says it's been gluten removed or gluten reduced.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Explain a little bit about what the differ in process is between those two and why being gluten-free is the choice that our community should be making versus
Yeah.
that of buying a gluten reduced or gluten removed.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you the facts and then I'll get emotional because I get mad about it. But so to start, there is beer on the shelf that's labeled gluten free. You cannot put that label on it unless every ingredient going into your beer is entirely gluten free. So they figure if every ingredient going in is gluten free, then the end product is gluten free. Um, Gluten reduced or gluten removed beers are beers that are actually made with barley or wheat. And so they're produced like any traditional craft beer or beer. And then an enzyme gets dropped into this beer, which chops the gluten into pieces. And so the pieces of gluten are very, very small in there, but they're actually still in the beer. And what was happening was, 20 parts per million or less, this beer was testing less. And so people were thinking, awesome, we figured this out. We can get it to celiac people and gluten free people safely. And so they put it out in the market. And what was happening were multiple reports coming back of I'm getting sick, I'm getting sick, I'm getting sick, what's going on? And so a woman in Australia did a study and actually, once looking at the liquid, found that it was not removed. It was just in much smaller pieces. And they were so small that the tests used were not picking them up. So, highly sensitive people, not just celiac, but like any gluten intolerant type person, um, were coming back reporting illness, and they were correct. It turns out our guts are more sensitive than the tests that they were using at the time. And so I do think the intent was good. However, it didn't work, and people are getting sick from these beers. So in turn, you cannot label these as gluten-free. So you'll see them out in the market as gluten reduced, crafted to remove gluten. Remove is very deceiving because it doesn't remove it. It's been proven now. So those beers are out there. I do think the more educated people get, the less I'm seeing them out there. And then the emotional side of me is like, there's not gluten reduced food. I don't
Mhm.
even know why there's a gluten reduced beer category. And you certainly don't see peanut reduced products. So I just don't know why it exists. But I think it exists because initially intentions were good and they thought they had come up with something. And the answer is they haven't. And we have, or these gluten free breweries have, or anybody with celiac disease knows that the ultimate cure is avoiding gluten altogether. And so these dedicated breweries we're a tight knit community that really believes that gluten reduced is not the answer. You got to do it the hard way, which is dedicated gluten free ingredients.
Yeah. And it's perfectly okay to get passionate about things like that, because I do the same. When you go to a restaurant, you see gluten friendly or the word gluten smart. It's just like, what does that even mean? I mean,
Right.
basically, there's no regulation to it, but it makes you angry because
Yeah.
that is putting somebody in harm, potential harm. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, be passionate about it. It's good. We need more
Doesn't feel
people
safe. Right.
listening. so,
Yes. And just
so
more education. I mean, this conversation's great. And really,
yeah.
a huge part of my role is just that. It's just educating people.
So what ingredients are you using in your gluten-free beers that differs, let's say, from those commonplace beers we see in the marketplace right now?
Yeah, yeah. So, ultimately when I was going gluten-free and trying to figure out gluten-free beer, trying gluten-free beers that I just was not pleased with, it came down to ingredients. And any beer out on the market ultimately is made with four ingredients. So it's grain, hops, water, and yeast. And the yeast we can source gluten-free. Water's gluten-free, hops are gluten-free, but most beers are made with barley and wheat. And that's where the challenge is. And especially at that time, if there was a gluten-free beer on the market, rather than replacing barley and wheat, which are grains, with grains, they were using syrups. So sorghum syrup, rice syrup, um, sometimes the sugar. Um, and you could taste it in those beers, and some beers are still made with those ingredients. So to me, it was very sweet. It was very thin. Um, it just didn't taste like beer to me. And
Mhm.
so in my brain, it was like, oh man, we got to just, the other three are taken care of. It's just this one thing. Like, why don't we replace it with the same thing? So, like, grain with grain. And a funny story is about, this was 10 years ago, 11 years ago. I'm Googling gluten free grains you can brew with. And at that time, the only company in the whole world that was producing gluten free grains that I could brew with was 40 miles from my front door in Fort Collins, Colorado. It's a company called Grouse Malt House. It is another woman owned business. Like, some of the moments when I'm starting this company were like this, like, this is so weird. I have to go do this. I have to go
Uh,
try this. And it's another reason my very first, good practice brew was up in Fort Collins, because she was up there and Grouse was up there. So at that time, Grouse was sourcing from local farmers and all gluten-free grains. And if you look, ultimately, there are more gluten-free grains on the planet Earth than gluten-full grains. So there's a lot to play with. And right now, I'm going to tell you what we brew with, and we might get back together in 10 years, and I'll tell you totally different grains because there's so many. But a lot that brewers brew with now are millet, buckwheat, quinoa, rice, maize or corn. Those are all gluten-free grains. So I just couldn't understand why we weren't swapping grain for grain. There is a good reason, and that cost and that expense plays into it, just like the
Hmm.
equipment side of it. But ultimately, we've tried a number of these combinations, and for Holidaily, we have found millet and buckwheat to be the best combination for us. And we source them all from Grouse Malt House still. She can roast them to almost any different flavor or style. I mean, you had talked about being in the tap room. We can really do anything. It's just a matter of time and experimentation. Right now in our tap room, we have a Goza on, so a really sour beer. You know, we have our wit style beer on, which is a wheat style beer, but made with millet and buckwheat. Um, so we can make really anything. We have an imperial bourbon barrel aged stout we put on in the
Hmm.
winter. Um, so these grains allow us to produce any style. At least that's what we found so far. And I think the quality of the ingredients that we put into our beer, we're 10 years into this now, so we have really our process dialed. I think that's the differentiator between Holidaily and maybe some other beers you'll find out on the market that are gluten free.
Yeah, I was going to. I mean, it's been 10 years, but you said that the process is dialed in now, and you touched on, you made some home brews, and some, may not have been as successful as others. Yeah,
Right.
how many iterations have you had to go through? Because you talked about sorghum. I've had sorghum beer before, and it's not.
Yeah.
You're right. There's something with the flavoring of it that just isn't quite, of what you expect from a beer flavor. And when I was in the tap room, every beer that I had, and I had three or four. I wasn't driving, but I had three or four, and they all were a wonderful flavor. They were you
Thank
couldn't. It was
you.
all, they were crisp. They were good. I mean, it was one of those things you're just like, oh yeah, I can drink this sitting here, and enjoy the company all day.
Hmm. Hmm.
So how many, with a typical batch, let's say like with, like you had mentioned your wheat type of beer, or your sour type of beer. How many like trial and errors do you have with each of those? Before it might be a differing number, but is there a certain process you do, and how long does that take before you hit that
Yeah.
and you go, yep, that's it?
It feels countless when you're in the middle of the process. And we
Uh-huh.
have really two different breweries. So we have in the tap room is our original brewery. So you probably saw that when you were here. And then we have a production brewery across the street. So the difference being when you talk about beer, you talk about barrels. So anybody that went to keg or to college, a keg is a half a barrel.
Hmm.
Well, maybe you didn't have to go to college for that, but so we talk in barrels, and the brewery in our tap room is 20 barrels of fermentation, and the brewery across the street is 840. So it's a totally different scale.
Yeah.
But what we do is we start on this 20 barrel system, and that's where we get our practice. That's where we started really for 3 years. All of our brewing was here in the smaller brewery until we built the bigger brewery. So this is our playground, and this is where we get to play with different flavors and styles and do different iterations, different types. And it can be a lot until we decide, okay, this is when we're going to put in the market. And then we move it over to the production brewery once we have it dialed. So
Hmm.
once it's over across the street, we've played with it quite a bit to say, yep, let's package it. This is the style, a brand we want to move forward with. In the early days, it was my little homebrew kit in my kitchen, and it was a million iterations. And then when we started here, really we started with actually three beers we still package and distribute, and it was our Riva Stout, which is our winter seasonal, our Fat Randy's IPA, and our favorite blonde, which is our biggest seller. Those were the first three beers we've ever produced here in this brewery, and now they're our biggest beers that we produce overall. The stout is a seasonal, but favorite blonde is by far our biggest beer, and then Fat Randy's our second biggest. So crazy that we had it sort of dialed from the beginning, but those practices were in my kitchen in the very, very beginning before we even had a brewery.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned, the buckwheat, the millet, the different grains that
Mhm.
you can use. Do each of those have a different effect on the end product that you've identified? Like, does one create this flavor, that, and does it help you with that creative process?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. So after practicing a lot more with them, we know sort of the qualities of each of them, what they can help with. Um, one's better for flavor, one's better for like body and mouthfeel of the beer or head of the beer. So we know that, and then we can kind of predict, with different percentages what we're going to end up with. But beer also is a mad science, and you think you know
Uh-huh.
it, and something crazy comes out. So it's another reason to practice in smaller batches versus just throw something on the big tank and let her rip. There's really a process to trying it out before you make investments on a huge scale.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to look a little bit into the future. I mean, I'm talking dream world vision here. Do you ever
Hmm.
see a time like, okay, you're there in the Denver area, and you ever see a time that you could go to a baseball stadium such as the Rocky Stadium, and every concession stand would have a gluten-free option, or now a crazy thought, a dedicated tap that you could get a draft gluten-free beer. Do you see that being something that could potentially be achievable with the growth of the market?
Definitely. I think the market continues to grow and consumers are continuing to demand it. So we're in almost every single stadium in Denver. Um, we are in Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City. We're up in the arena in Seattle. They're seeing enough demand, and a lot of the stadiums reached out to us because, yes, the gluten-free community has been loud enough about gluten-free options that it lands for most venues in their top 5 of complaints. So
Mhm.
bathrooms, parking, drunk people fighting, I don't know, but those would be the top 4 to me. Sometimes it's terrible quarterbacks land in the top 5, I don't know, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, sometimes depending on your team. Um, but yeah, we get reached out to because it is in their top complaints, and it might not be beer specific, but gluten-free options in stadiums are in their top 5 every venue I've talked to. Um,
Yeah.
so luckily there is this big demand, but I think, for us, we want to be the obvious choice for gluten-free beer in the US. So you think stout, you think Guinness, right? You think tissue, you think Kleenex. I want you thinking gluten-free beer, you're thinking Holidaily.
So I have to ask the question from all of my East Coast followers. They want to know. They want to know. Okay,
Yes.
what's that plan? Is there a plan to head east? Because right now, you have the Western market. Are there
Yeah.
plans to grow into a national level type of distribution system?
I mean, like I said, we want to be the obvious choice for gluten-free beer in the US. So it will not be next week. It will probably not be next year. It may not be in the next 5 years. This is we've got to be real strategic about it. We talked about licensing in every single state. We have to do that. You have to find distributor partners in every single state. Shipping beer is very, very expensive. So it's not as easy as just flipping the switch and getting out there. Um, we do ship beer to consumers in states that allow it. So you can go to our website and get beer shipped to your home in states that allow it. That's entirely not my rule. That's the state's rule. I'd love to ship people beer. Um, so it's limited on who can, and it is expensive because you do have to pay for that shipping cost. That
Mhm.
might give you an idea of how much it costs us to ship beer that far, right? So
Yeah.
um, it is certainly in the plan, and it's a matter of strategy. It's a matter of retail partners and where they want us. So, where does Whole Foods want us? Where does Kroger want us? That can help drive that too. And then it's a matter of just time and execution by our team.
So the
So
East Coast people right
the
now, they can
answer
just.
is not no. The
I was gonna say,
answer
I was gonna
is
say, in the meantime,
soon-ish.
they can head out to the tap room and
Yeah.
and
Oh,
just
yeah. Heck yeah.
yeah, just
Please. Yes.
Go out there. I mean, that's a recommended visit
Hmm.
from me. So,
Yeah.
but I'm sure in all of our posts that we're gonna put out there, we'll put your website on there. You can right now go
Yeah.
to the NCA webpage. Holidaily is listed as a sponsor of ours, and you can click there on their logo. It goes to the store page or the web page, so you'll be able to find that if and check your state if you're watching this, and see if that's
Yes.
something where you can get that. So I've taken way too much of your time already. Is there anything else, Karen, that you feel you want to share with the celiac community, with the gluten-free community about Holidaily, that you feel that would be something that they'd want to hear that would excite them?
Yeah, I mean, we have this year alone, so we're, beginning of June, but we have a ton of just new and exciting things coming out and that have already come out this year. So, if you're looking out in the market, we previously had plastic holders on our beer. We've now switched all of that over to cardboard wraps. So A, we look prettier on the shelves and you'll be able to find us a little easier, but ultimately, this is a better, more sustainable packaging option for us. So I think that's really important. We've launched a new product, so our very first ever variety pack. Um, our favorite blonde is our biggest seller, and we see a lot of data out there about fruited products being um, demanded by consumers, wanted by consumers. So we really took those two things and put together a variety six pack. So it's a fruited blonde, two tangerine, two melon, and two passion fruit. Um, we have been also asked a lot for a light lager. While our blonde is a light beer, it's still a craft beer. And a lot of people that are gluten free either have never had beer or the last beer they drank was Coors Light, Bud Light, Miller Light, and they're looking for something like that. And so we are currently testing a light lager. It's called Darty Lager. A Darty is a day party.
Hmm.
So it's a beer you can drink during the day if you'd like. But we just started testing our Darty Lager in Colorado and Texas for this summer. But I would be looking for that to launch as well in other markets, probably within the next year if our test goes well. So two new products, new packaging for everything. And we're also looking at, added geography as well. So there's a lot going on here. Holidaily's growing. I think there's some rhetoric around craft beer about beer struggling right now, and do not put Holidaily in that bucket. We're up double digits year over year and continue to plan to do that.
I
And come
can't
to the
wait to.
tap room.
I'm gonna say you have tremendous artwork on your cans too. I mean, the
Thanks.
one with the person in the skis and the snow upside
Yeah,
down.
oh
I
yeah.
can't wait to see the artwork for the Darty.
Check it out. It's pretty cool. It's pretty
That
cool.
is very cool.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
well,
Yeah.
Karen,
And
thank
I
you so
think,
much for your time. Thank you
yeah,
for everything that you are doing. I'm speaking on
thank
behalf of
you.
our community.
Man, you
Thank you for
guys
everything you're
too.
doing to provide a product out there that is safe for people, that is something that they can go up and grab and they can thoroughly enjoy. So we just appreciate you being a partner and for your time spent with us and answering these questions.
Thank you so much for your time and obviously supporting all of us in this community. Having resources is hugely powerful, and we appreciate all that you do as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you.